He said the cameras were off, that no one would ever know. But he forgot something. I'm the one who created the show in the first place. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply you handed them your spotlight, only to find out they used it to rehearse their betrayal? My name is Elara Wynn. I'm 32, executive producer and creator of one of the most watched dating reality shows on television. Every season I help people fall in love under the bright lights of a controlled fantasy. But this season, the fantasy was mine. And the heartbreak? It was real. You see, my boyfriend, Cassian Reed, an aspiring actor I thought I'd discovered, wasn't just the newest contestant. He was mine. We kept our relationship secret to maintain the illusion of fairness. I thought it was romantic, intimate, sacred, until I found out he was cheating. On set. With another contestant, under the same lights I helped hang in front of the same cameras I installed. He didn't even know they were still rolling. And the woman, a rising star with just the right sob story, the right angles, and apparently the right willingness to flirt her way to the finale. Was she manipulated? Maybe. Was he disgusting? Definitely. But neither of them saw what was coming. You might wonder why I didn't just fire him, expose him in the tabloids, or disappear like every other heartbroken executive behind the scenes. Because I had a better idea. I rewrote the finale, the script, the lighting, the guest list. I brought in the press. I moved the live taping to primetime. I gave him exactly what he wanted: center stage, spotlight, and then silence. Because when the world expects a proposal and you deliver the truth instead, that's the kind of plot twist people remember. So if you've ever been betrayed, manipulated, or ghosted by someone who thought they could control the narrative, stick around. Because in this story, I don't just get even. I take back the mic. Let me tell you how I hijacked the finale and made it the season they'll never forget. Before the cameras, before the stage lights, and long before the betrayal, there was just us. Cassian Reed and I met at a networking mixer in Brooklyn, a dim bar filled with people pretending not to be desperate for their big break. I was a fresh associate producer with a clipboard and too much to prove. He was just another actor trying to memorize monologues between bartending shifts. What made him stand out? Not his looks, though yes, those mattered later, but his confidence. That quiet kind of self-assurance that made you believe he'd already seen the future and knew he belonged there. I still remember how he leaned in, offering a half smile and saying, "You look like someone who rewrites endings." I should have known that line would come back to haunt me. For 4 years, we built something. It wasn't glamorous. It was studio apartments and frozen dumplings. It was helping him rehearse at 2 a.m. before auditions and him talking me through anxiety attacks when deadlines piled up. We were messy and broke, but we were a team until the day he came home with the news. "Elara," he said breathless, "I got cast. Love unscripted. I'm one of the final contestants." I blinked. "You applied to a dating show?" "It's not what you think," he rushed. "They needed a wild card. Someone charismatic but unexpected. It's a career move, not a real thing." It sounded like a bad idea, but this was the industry. You played roles, blurred lines, smiled at cameras, and besides, I was offered a promotion to co-produce the very season he was joining. Conflict of interest? Technically. But this wasn't a real relationship, right? Just screen chemistry, carefully edited storylines, and fake roses. Except it never feels fake when you're the one watching it happen. The filming began. Cassian was charming on screen, almost too polished. He knew the beats, when to be vulnerable, when to flash that grin. America loved him, and so did the lead, Sienna Vale. She was the golden girl of the season, fierce, magnetic, a social media darling with a tragic backstory and an army of stylists. From week 1, she noticed Cassian. Their chemistry was undeniable. I told myself it was scripted, that the moments between them, the way he looked at her, how she touched his arm, were just good television. But then came the slips. I'd find lipstick on his collar after night shoots. He stopped sleeping at my place, saying he needed to stay at the production house to maintain the illusion. He started muting his phone, locking it, taking calls on balconies, and worst of all, he stopped looking at me like I mattered. I remember the night I truly knew something had changed. We were in the control room, watching raw footage. Cassian and Sienna were on a one-on-one date, wine in hand, ocean sunset behind them. She said, "Have you ever felt like someone just gets you without trying?" And he nodded. Not in character, not for show, just him, soft-eyed and open. And I felt something inside me shatter, because I'd seen that look before, in my living room, in my kitchen, in bed at 3 a.m. when he whispered, "You're the only one who knows the real me." I wanted to scream, but I stayed quiet, because this was my show, and I had just decided to rewrite the ending. From that moment on, I stopped being his girlfriend and started being the executive producer. I buried the heartbreak behind call sheets and camera angles. I made sure the dates got more romantic, the stakes higher, the editing tighter. I crafted the perfect love story, not because I believed in it, but because I wanted the audience to. I wanted them to root for him. I wanted the world to love the man who had gutted me. It wasn't just revenge. It was about power. About knowing I could build him up so high that the fall would be deafening. The irony. Cassian had no idea I was watching his every move. He thought he was fooling me. But every glance, every touch, every confession, I saw them all. I had eyes in every editing bay, microphones on every collar. Sienna, to her credit, didn't know the full truth either. She probably thought she was just winning the game. Maybe she even believed he was sincere. But I'd seen enough of this business to know Cassian was always chasing the next camera, the next stage, and the finale, it would be live. Broadcast to 12 million viewers, a beachside villa, a fairy tale setup, the final, "Will you accept this rose?" moment he planned to propose to Sienna. He hadn't told me, of course, but one of the PAs had overheard him rehearsing lines in his trailer. "You make me believe in forever again." It sounded like poetry. It sounded like betrayal. That was when I called the network. "I want full creative control over the finale," I said. "All camera feeds, audio, live switchboard." They hesitated. "That's unusual. We normally... Do you want another viral season or not?" They agreed, and I got to work. I rewrote the final cue cards. I changed the stage setup. I added a private interview segment for transparency, which was really just a trap. I had the wardrobe team prep Sienna in a dress Cassian once told me was his dream color on a woman. Everything, from the lighting to the music, was a weapon. The crew thought I was just being a perfectionist. They had no idea I was choreographing a public execution. And through it all, Cassian smiled. He had no clue. He kept texting me like everything was normal. "Hey, mind checking segment 3's audio? Can you make sure my mic pack is secure?" I answered like nothing had changed. But inside, I was counting down the hours. 3 days before the finale, I sat alone in the editing room, watching a raw clip where he kissed Sienna in the rain. I didn't cry, I just whispered, "You chose the wrong producer to betray." And then I called the live graphics team. "We're going to need a title overlay at the end," I told them. Bold font, white on black. They asked what it should say. I paused, then smiled. Finale rewritten. Cassian and I had always maintained the illusion of balance, our work and our relationship dancing precariously on the same wire. In front of the crew, we were the power couple. Elara, the relentless executive producer, and Cassian, the charming breakout star who had somehow gone from second-tier actor to national heartthrob. But behind closed doors, the cracks had started to show. At first, I thought the stress was getting to him. He was more distracted, more irritable. But then again, so was I. We were in week 7 of shooting Forever After, and the energy on set was volatile. Cameras captured every laugh, every kiss, every backhanded compliment between contestants. but they missed the real drama unraveling between Cassian and me until I started paying attention. It was a night shoot. The final 4 contestants were on a group date, a champagne yacht cruise staged under carefully controlled lighting. Cassian was supposed to be on for the cameras, giving each woman just enough attention to keep the audience guessing. But off camera, he slipped away for too long between takes. I had access to every feed, every GoPro, every lav mic, every piece of raw footage. That was my job. It wasn't until I reviewed some behind-the-scenes handhelds the next morning that I saw it. A production assistant, presumably bored and aimlessly filming, had captured Cassian exiting a dark corner of the yacht with a contestant, Kala, one of the final 4. His shirt was wrinkled. Her lipstick was smudged. Her hand lingered on his belt for a moment too long. My stomach knotted. I watched it again, then a third time. Then I listened to the audio. Nothing explicit, but their flirtation was undeniable. I felt the bile rise in my throat. I didn't confront him immediately, not because I doubted it, but because I needed more. One moment could be explained away. He was good at spinning. He could twist a betrayal into a misunderstanding before I even finished accusing him. So I waited. I watched. I became the silent eye of the storm. Cassian's charisma had always been his currency. He knew how to command a room, how to touch someone's shoulder just long enough to feel intimate, how to lower his voice so that everything he said felt like a secret. But now I was watching him wield that charm like a weapon, only it wasn't aimed at me anymore. 2 days later, I caught him again, this time in the editing bay. Kala had come in for a casual meeting about how her narrative was being framed in the show. She was concerned she was coming off too confident, and she wanted to know if we could tone it down. She wore Cassian's hoodie. She left it behind when she walked out. I held it up, stared at the familiar logo. It wasn't mine. It wasn't a gift. It was his. And now it smelled like her perfume. I sat down at the editing station, the hoodie still in my lap, and reviewed the footage we had from the last week. I found 5 more moments, small, fleeting, but damning. Glances held too long, whispered conversations between takes. The way her body leaned toward his even when the camera wasn't rolling. He thought he was invisible behind the glass of his own stardom. But I built this glass, and I knew every crack. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I bookmarked every timestamp, logged every clip, and created a private folder. I named it Finale. I stopped sleeping. Not entirely, just enough to make my reflection unfamiliar. The dark circles under my eyes weren't from grief. They were from plotting. Every day I greeted Cassian with the same familiar smile, the same soft squeeze of his hand. I brought him coffee before his interviews. I reminded him of his call times. I played the part of the devoted partner while inside, I was rewiring every inch of the finale. He had no idea. Cassian believed I was too professional to let my personal life interfere with the production. He wasn't wrong, just not in the way he assumed. My professionalism was the reason I didn't destroy him on the spot. I was waiting for the right time, the right camera angle, the right emotional build. If he wanted a reality show, I'd give him the most unforgettable finale the network had ever aired. But first, I needed confirmation. From her. Kala wasn't dumb. That much was clear from her audition tapes. She had a subtle way of framing herself as both irresistible and innocent. She knew the exact moment to make herself cry. But I also knew her type. Strategic, insecure underneath it all, and easily rattled when cornered. So I invited her for a one-on-one producer debrief, under the pretense of prepping her for a possible win. I told her we were filming a fake exit interview, just a standard archive, nothing that would make it to air. She arrived in a lavender dress, all smiles and false humility. I pressed record. "You've made quite an impression," I said, adjusting the mic clipped to her neckline. "How do you feel your connection with Cassian has evolved?" She giggled. "It's gotten intense." "In what way?" A blush bloomed on her cheeks. "I mean, off camera, we've really clicked." I tilted my head. "Off camera?" Her eyes flicked to the lens for a split second. She hesitated. "You know," she said carefully, "those moments when the crew's resetting or there's downtime between takes. Would you say it's romantic?" Calla glanced at me again, but I held her gaze steadily. She cracked. "Yes," she whispered, smiling. "I think we're past the point of just calling it an on-screen connection." I nodded slowly. "Does he feel the same?" "I think so. He said he doesn't really talk to Elara anymore, not like he used to." "Interesting. And if you win?" I asked. "If you become his final choice?" "I'd be happy," she said. "We're already kind of together, you know? We just can't be public yet." I ended the recording 5 minutes later. She hugged me before she left. She thought I was an ally. I uploaded the clip into my finale folder and labeled it Confession, Calla. I had what I needed. There was a particular irony in watching Cassian lie on camera while the whole world believed him. He was the bachelor everyone rooted for, the wounded romantic whose last relationship had ended painfully because of a misunderstanding. The audience adored him. The sponsors adored him more. But I knew who he really was, a man who believed love was a stage and he was the only one holding the script. The finale was 3 weeks away. That gave me 21 days to turn this reality show into poetic justice. I wasn't just producing a season-ending episode. I was producing retribution, and Cassian Reed would be its unwilling star. By the time the final week of production rolled around, I had everything I needed. Timelines, recordings, camera cuts, confessionals. But more importantly, I had the truth, wrapped in HD and layered with irony. Cassian remained oblivious, floating through each shoot with smug assurance. The closer we got to the finale, the more convinced he became that he had everyone in the palm of his hand, Calla, the audience, and especially me. He forgot I was the one who edited his story, and now I was going to rewrite the ending. The finale was scheduled to film live at a vineyard in Sonoma. Lavish, romantic, saturated in golden hour light. It was designed to be a perfect proposal moment, with drone shots, string quartets, and a sweeping crane to capture the final kiss. Except there would be no kiss, no proposal, just exposure. I submitted the final rundown script 3 days before shoot day. It looked normal on the surface. Standard call times, contestant placements, camera directions. But I embedded silent changes throughout the flow, swapping B-roll footage, redirecting live camera angles, and instructing the editors to prepare a last-minute bonus montage to be aired right before the closing scene. I called it Behind the Final Rose. It opened with sweet moments of Cassian and Calla, her laughing, him reaching for her hand. Then came the off-camera clips, Calla's confession, Cassian's flirty-mic'd comments during breaks, a blurred clip of them disappearing into his trailer for 15 minutes, juxtaposed with footage of me, working late, calling him babe on set, kissing his cheek as he turned away with an empty smile. It was painful, but it was real. I wasn't just sabotaging his image. I was giving the audience a choice between the fiction they'd bought into and the truth I was unveiling. The producers watched the cut in silence. "You're going to air this live?" one of them asked. "Yes," I said. "It'll ruin him." I looked them dead in the eye. "No, it'll reveal him." The night before the finale, I slept better than I had in months. Maybe it was the certainty. Maybe it was knowing that, for once, I wasn't the one being edited. The day of the shoot, the vineyard was radiant. The lighting was perfect. The tension was high. Cassian strutted through the rose garden in his designer suit, like a man walking into his coronation. Calla stood in a flowing white gown, rehearsing her acceptance lines. The cameras rolled. The host spoke. Cassian began his final speech, voice trembling with scripted sincerity. "Calla, you've shown me love, hope, and the kind of future I never thought I deserved." He reached for the ring. The screen behind them flickered, and then, without warning, the montage began. The music dropped. The audience gasped. Calla's smile froze. Cassian's jaw locked. On the live feed, millions watched the curated illusion of true love collapse, frame by frame. Calla's confession, Cassian's lies, the coldness in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. He turned, frantic, looking for the production team. The cameras didn't cut. I was in the control room, headset on, eyes locked to the monitor. "Stay on him," I told the camera op. "Wide angle." The crowd murmured. The host stammered, and Cassian Reed, America's sweetheart, stood center stage, exposed not by scandal but by truth. And I, Elara Wynn, the executive producer of The One, finally told my story, without ever speaking a word. I didn't cry. Not at first. When I saw the footage, grainy security cam footage from the back hallway of the set, my stomach twisted, but no tears came. Just this cold, detached stillness, like my body knew something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. Cassian, her, hands where they shouldn't be. The same Cassian who kissed me on the cheek 5 minutes later, like nothing happened. The silence after the clip ended was heavier than any shouting could have been. I stared at the laptop screen, unmoving, while Deja, my assistant, hovered behind me with her lips pressed tight. She had found the footage, reluctantly. Said someone from the lighting team tipped her off, whispering that there was more to Cassian's on-screen chemistry than acting. I had brushed it off at first. Cassian flirted with half the world on camera. It was his job. But then Deja's voice cracked when she said, "You need to see this." I watched it again. Slower. Cassian brushing a strand of hair behind Alina's ear, her leaning in, his hand on her waist. A private moment in a public place, so brazen they didn't even care who might see. And I had been directing the entire production, clueless, thinking I was in control. I turned the laptop closed carefully, like it might explode. "Delete that copy," I said, "and don't tell anyone else, yet." Deja hesitated. "Elara, what are you going to do?" I looked up at her. "I'm going to burn this place to the ground." But not yet. I spent the next day in a kind of dissociative haze, watching Cassian from behind monitors, pretending like I didn't know. He laughed with the crew, flirted with the contestants, tossed me a wink from across the set. It took everything in me not to recoil, not to scream. Instead, I planned. I started with Alina. She was a wild card, young, hungry, charming in the kind of effortless way that made her the producer's favorite. Also, clearly ambitious enough to sleep her way up. I scheduled a private interview with her, claiming we were testing new scenes for a spin-off idea. "You're really killing it this season," I told her, voice smooth, camera rolling. "But I want to get deeper into your motivations. What drives you, Alina?" She smiled, that too perfect smile. "Love. Connection. I think we all just want someone to really see us, you know?" "Oh, absolutely," I nodded. "And Cassian, do you feel like he really sees you?" She blinked. For a fraction of a second, her smile faltered. Then came the practiced laugh. "Cassian's great, super professional." "Right," I said. "But off camera?" Her eyes darted toward the camera lens. I leaned in, lowering my voice like we were sharing a secret. "No judgment. This isn't for the show, just between us girls." She hesitated. "He said I had potential, that if I played things right, this could lead to more than just one season." Bingo. I smiled gently. "Thanks, Alina. That's all I needed." After she left, I told Deja to flag the footage. We might need it later. Then came the hard part. Finding proof Cassian wasn't just cheating, but manipulating the system. Sleeping with a contestant wasn't just immoral, it was a breach of contract. Grounds for immediate dismissal. And if I could prove it was more than one contestant, or that he had promised them benefits in exchange, that was my key. Not revenge, not scandal, power. I needed witnesses, not gossip, not speculation. Solid testimony, and the only people who knew what happened behind the scenes were the ones Cassian assumed were invisible. the crew. So I started talking, not as Elara Wynn, executive producer, but as Elara, the woman who had been lied to, who had given 7 years to someone who saw her as disposable. First was Jordan, a sound tech who spent hours rigging Cassian's mic pack. I found him during lunch break sitting under a shade tent scrolling through TikTok. "Jordan," I said casually, "remember that night shoot on episode 4? Did you happen to catch anything weird on Cassian's mic feed?" He raised an eyebrow. "Weird how?" "I don't know. Off-script flirting? Any unusual backstage chatter?" He leaned back in his chair. "You mean like when he told contestant number 5 he'd rewrite the script if it meant more time with her?" I blinked. "Wait, what?" Jordan shrugged. "I thought he was just being Cassian. But yeah, that mic was hot. Recorded the whole thing. You want the file?" My heart sped up. "Yes, please." One down. Next, I talked to the costume department. Cassian had always been vain, obsessed with how he looked on camera. But vanity meant habits, and habits left trails. Tasha, our wardrobe coordinator, hesitated at first. "Elara, you're putting me in a tight spot." "I know," I said gently. "But if he's crossing boundaries, it's not just about me anymore. It's about the girls, about the crew, about the integrity of the show." She exhaled. "Fine. I'll send you the alterations log. You didn't hear it from me, but one of the dresses Alina wore was originally pulled for Cassian's ex. He asked for a switch, said it would make the audience root for her more." That wasn't just preference. That was manipulation. Layer by layer, the mask began to crack. I reviewed footage, cross-checked dates. I found a pattern. Every time Cassian advanced a contestant romantically, there was a shift in production notes, a slight alteration in edit direction, a suspicious narrative push. It was subtle, but deliberate. He wasn't just cheating. He was rewriting the story for himself. Meanwhile, on camera, he acted like he was on some noble journey to find love. The fan base adored him. Social media gushed about his growth, his vulnerability. And yet, in private, he was crafting a romance he could control, using women like props. I pulled Deja into my office late one night. The wall was covered in sticky notes, red thread connecting events like we were solving a murder. In a way, we were. "This is bigger than just us," I told her. "If this leaks the wrong way, the network will bury it. They'll protect Cassian to protect the show." Deja nodded. "Then we leak it the right way." We didn't need tabloids. We had cameras. We had an audience of millions. And we had one final live episode fully in our control. "What if?" I asked. "Instead of quietly exposing him after the show?" Deja grinned. "We do it live?" My eyes burned, but I smiled. "We do it live." She sat beside me, scrolling through files. "We'll need to time it perfectly. No dead air. No room for legal interference." "I'll handle legal," I said, pulling out the clause Cassian never bothered to read. Section 14.3. Any breach of contestant confidentiality agreements or unauthorized personal relationships between host and participant shall forfeit all network protections. Cassian had given me the rope. I was just choosing when to let go. By the end of that week, the plan was airtight. Every thread woven, every document backed up in 2 separate drives. I had enough footage to end Cassian's career 3 times over, clips of him whispering promises to contestants in dressing rooms, offhand remarks about being above the rules, and one damning scene where he laughed to a producer about how easy it was to steer the audience. It was all so casual to him, like none of it would ever come back. But it would, on finale night. Still, I needed one last piece. Something personal. Something that would hit harder than any contract clause or video file. I needed Cassian's confession, so I baited him. It was surprisingly easy. I asked him to meet me for drinks after filming Wrapped one night, said I was thinking about the future, our future, and wanted to clear the air. He showed up looking smug, wearing that same navy jacket I had once told him made him look powerful. The irony burned. "I'm glad you reached out," he said, leaning in, voice soft. We've been through a lot, you and me. I smiled. 7 years. He chuckled. And look at us now, running the hottest dating show in America. Maybe we're not as broken as we thought. He was already drunk on the idea of being forgiven. Perfect. I let the silence linger, then asked softly, "Were any of them worth it?" He tilted his head. "Any of who?" "The girls, the backstage stuff." He blinked, then smirked. "Come on, Elara, you know how this business works. You either play the game or get played." I kept my face still, heart racing. The recorder in my clutch was capturing every word. "And Alina?" He shrugged. "She knew what she was doing. They always do. Doesn't mean I didn't have fun." Fun. That's what it had all been. My life, my trust, our history. Fun. I nodded slowly, then stood. "Thanks for the clarity." He frowned. "Wait, what?" But I was already walking away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the edit bay, combing through every second of finale footage we had prepped, reworking the script in my head. Deja was beside me, half asleep, still scrolling through backup drives. "You really going to go through with it?" she mumbled. "Yes." "You sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." The night before the live finale, I uploaded everything to a secure server under a fake producer name, just in case. We weren't just airing a show, we were exposing a rot. And we had one shot. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of rehearsals, fake smiles, lighting checks, and Cassian acting like he owned the world. I kept my distance, let him believe I had backed down, that he had won. But when the final countdown began, and the red light blinked on, my fingers tightened around the cue button. Cassian took center stage, grinning into the camera. "America, welcome to the moment you've all been waiting for." And that's when I hijacked the feed. Cut to black. Cue video file. Confidential Cassian Riad. Let the truth begin. The studio lights were warmer than usual, casting a soft orange hue over the audience as they settled into their seats. Cameras panned slowly across the eager crowd, catching smiles, whispers, and the occasional wave at the lens. It looked like any other live finale, perfect, polished, and brimming with anticipation. But only I knew the storm that was about to break. I stood backstage, mic clipped to my collar, my earpiece buzzing with final tech checks. My heart pounded, not with nerves, but with a cold, calculated rhythm. Cassian was at the other end of the stage, oblivious. He wore that confident, TV-ready smirk, his good guy persona wrapped around him like designer armor. He had no idea what was coming. "Final checks, Elara," the floor manager whispered. I nodded. "Let's roll." The countdown started. The host, a neutral stand-in, not someone involved in production, strode on stage and welcomed the audience. Applause erupted. The camera cut to Cassian, who waved and winked like he hadn't spent the past 2 months lying, cheating, and pretending to be the perfect boyfriend on national television. The segment ran smoothly at first. Recaps, bloopers, behind-the-scenes laughs. It was almost surreal, watching him bask in the glow, thinking he'd won. I waited, standing behind the curtain, the script in my hand, not the one he thought we'd follow. The cue came. "We've got a special surprise for you all," the host said with a grin. "Tonight's finale is unlike any we've ever aired before." Cassian straightened, clearly expecting a grand romantic gesture, maybe even a proposal setup. Instead, the screen behind him lit up. I stepped into the spotlight. The audience gasped. Cassian's smile faltered. His body tensed as I walked toward him, calm, steady, like a woman with nothing left to lose and nothing left to fear. "Elara," he said, barely masking his confusion. "What are you doing?" I held up the mic. "Telling the truth." The room went silent. "I know you cheated on me," I began. My voice echoed through the studio, soft but lethal. "While we were filming this season, while you told America we were soulmates." He blinked. "What are you talking about? That's not—" "Roll the tape," I said. And it did. The screen behind us played footage, grainy at first, then sharper, of Cassian sneaking into a trailer late at night, of him kissing a production assistant, the same woman he had called just a friend when I asked, of text messages, whispered audio clips, a timeline meticulously stitched together, undeniable and damning. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I let the truth speak for itself. The audience murmured in shock. Some gasped. Others booed. Cassian turned to the host. This wasn't cleared. This wasn't part of the... Elara is the executive producer, the host said coolly. She signed off on everything. Cassian's face drained of color. He turned back to me. You planned this? I gave you a chance to come clean, I said, but you chose to lie to me, to her. I pointed toward the production assistant, now visibly trembling in the audience, and to everyone watching. Silence, and then applause. Slow, steady, rising into thunder. But I wasn't done yet. Cassian's hands were clenched now, his usual smooth demeanor unraveling at the edges. This is slander, he snapped, voice sharp enough to cut through the still churning applause. You think you can ambush me live? You're ending your own career, Elara. No, I said evenly. I'm ending the performance. Another video clip began to roll, this time a conversation, one I had recorded just a week ago. Cassian's voice filled the studio, laughing about how easy it was to manipulate emotions for ratings. He bragged about using personal pain to drive viewership, even mentioning how having a messy relationship with Elara made the show more compelling. It was all there, plain as day. Cassian tried to step toward me, but security appeared at the edge of the stage, not to drag him out yet, but as a quiet reminder. He wasn't in control anymore. The host stood to the side, stunned, hands clasped tightly in front of them. The crowd didn't cheer this time. It was the kind of silence that comes with seeing something raw, something real. You used our relationship, I continued, for views, for clout, for a narrative. I made you famous, he spat. I raised an eyebrow. I was the executive producer before anyone knew your name. He opened his mouth to fire back, but stopped. Maybe he saw it in my eyes. I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't the woman he could guilt into silence anymore. I turned to the audience, my voice softening. This show was meant to help people find love. What it became was something else, a mirror of everything wrong with how we consume relationships for entertainment. But tonight, I want to give it back to the people watching. I looked into the camera. To those who have ever been cheated on, silenced, or made to feel like they weren't enough, this is for you. Another ripple of applause, then a standing ovation. Cassian was fuming now, pacing like a caged animal. You're done here, he growled under his breath. You think sponsors will stay after this circus? I smiled. Actually, they've already been briefed. I sent them the footage last night. His mouth parted in stunned silence. And the network? I added. They approved this finale. Turns out they prefer real drama over manufactured lies. From the wings, Deja gave me a small thumbs up. We had worked all night to prep the broadcast cut just in case something went wrong, but nothing had. Cassian backed away slightly. You'll regret this. I stepped closer. I already regretted trusting you, but not anymore. Suddenly, someone from the crowd called out. It was the production assistant, the one Cassian had secretly been involved with. She stood, hands trembling, but her voice clear. I didn't know he was still with you, she said. He told me you'd broken up, that the relationship was fake. I'm sorry, Elara. I nodded slowly, emotions swirling in my chest. I know. This was never about revenge on you. She sat back down, eyes shining. I turned back to Cassian, who now looked smaller somehow, deflated. This is your ending, I said, not unkindly. You wrote it. The screen behind us faded to black, and in bold white letters, the final message appeared. As the final message faded from the screen, the silence in the room deepened, thick, almost sacred. Then came a wave of something I hadn't expected. Not just applause, but a collective exhale. People weren't just reacting to the spectacle. They were breathing in the truth and exhaling something like relief. Cassian, once the star of the show, was now just a man standing in the middle of a mess he created. He looked around, at the crew who now avoided his gaze, at the audience whose adoration had turned to unease, and finally, at me, as if searching for some crack in my resolve. There was none. I stepped aside, motioning to the host. They hesitated, then cleared their throat and looked straight into the camera. "We thank you all for joining us tonight," they said. "This has been the most honest finale in the history of our show, and perhaps in the history of reality TV." The credits began to roll, not over highlights or bloopers, but over behind-the-scenes moments of kindness, laughter, and quiet solidarity. The pieces of a show no one ever got to see, the moments that mattered. I left the stage to thunderous applause. Backstage, Deja met me with tears in her eyes and wrapped me in a fierce hug. "You did it," she whispered. "I did what had to be done," I replied. As I walked through the corridors of the studio, past the dressing rooms and makeup stations, I felt something lift. For the first time in months, I wasn't carrying the weight of silence. I wasn't hiding or pretending. I had chosen truth, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my story. Outside, the cool night air met my skin like a baptism. Paparazzi lights flashed, questions were shouted, but I didn't stop. I didn't need to explain anything else. The finale had said it all. The next morning, headlines exploded. I didn't read the comments. I didn't watch the reruns. Instead, I turned off my phone, brewed a cup of coffee, and sat on my balcony watching the sunrise. It felt like the beginning of something new. Not a show, not a scandal, but a life unchained from someone else's lies. Later that day, the network called. They wanted to offer me a solo project, a documentary about power, truth, and the real stories behind the camera. I said I'd think about it, because now, for the first time in a long time, I had the space to decide. Cassian? He released a half-hearted apology video filled with excuses and bad lighting. The comments didn't go easy on him. Sponsors pulled out. His publicist quit. He went quiet after that. And me? I walked into my future with eyes open, with scars, yes, but also with strength. I had rewritten the ending, not with vengeance, but with clarity. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't scream or destroy, it's speak and make the world listen. The air inside the studio was still electric, even though the lights had dimmed and most of the crew had dispersed. I stood in the shadows just off stage, my heart pounding, not from nerves anymore, but from the sheer weight of what had just happened. The finale had aired. Millions had watched as Cassian's lies unraveled in real time. And now, silence. I walked outside into the crisp night air, the chaos behind me finally settling into memory. There were no cheers, no applause. Just the buzz of my phone vibrating incessantly with messages from strangers, journalists, former colleagues and friends, some offering congratulations, others stunned disbelief. But I ignored them all. I needed quiet. I needed space. Cassian hadn't said a word to me after the cameras stopped. He had stood frozen in place, his mic still on, eyes darting around the studio, looking for someone to save him. But no one did. His team, his supposed allies, had melted away the moment the truth surfaced. He was left alone, on stage, exposed and humiliated. I didn't want revenge to feel good. That was never the point. But walking away from that set, knowing that I had taken back my voice, my power, without screaming, without violence, it felt like exhaling after holding my breath for 7 years. Back at my apartment, I finally let myself sink onto the couch. My assistant had left a bottle of wine on the table with a handwritten note. "You did it, L." I smiled faintly and poured myself a glass, the weight of the night settling into my bones. I glanced at the television, which was still playing a news segment replaying clips from the finale. My face filled the screen for a brief moment before it cut to Cassian's shocked expression. Public opinion was shifting faster than I could track. Fans of the show were flooding social media with hashtags in my name. Articles had already started popping up. Executive producer exposes cheating fiancé live on air. Reality show finale turns into real-life scandal. Elara Wynn's boldest move yet. But the attention didn't thrill me. I didn't want to be a celebrity. I wanted peace. I wanted to rebuild. The next morning, I walked into the office building of the production company, my company now. The board had called an emergency meeting. I had expected backlash or, at the very least, a cold reception. Instead, they gave me a standing ovation. "You saved the brand," one of the senior producers told me. "What you did last night, it wasn't just brave, it was genius. Cassian's being dropped from all remaining projects," another added, "and we'd like to offer you full creative control moving forward." I nodded, still processing. I had taken a risk, one that could have cost me everything, but instead it had handed me exactly what Cassian always tried to keep from me: respect. I spent the next few weeks cleaning up the mess, not just publicly, but emotionally. Therapy helped, so did my friends, and slowly I started to see the light again. But it wasn't until I received a single envelope in the mail that everything crystallized. No name, no return address, just a USB drive. I plugged it into my laptop. It was a video from one of the crew members, unedited backstage footage. Cassian and one of the female contestants, weeks before our engagement. The audio was clear, the betrayal undeniable. I closed the laptop and didn't cry. There were no tears left, only clarity. I hadn't just exposed him to the world. I had saved myself from a lifetime of deception. In the days that followed, I declined every interview. Every network wanted a piece of me, a soundbite, a reaction, a breakdown. But I gave them nothing. I didn't need to defend myself. The footage spoke louder than I ever could. Instead, I turned inward. I re-watched the older seasons I had helped produce, not as a professional, but as a woman who now saw every frame through new eyes. There had always been cracks in Cassian's facade. I just hadn't wanted to believe them. The way he performed sincerity for the camera but turned cold the moment it cut. The way he rewrote memories to suit his narrative. The subtle gaslighting disguised as charm. It had all been there, hiding in plain sight. Now I saw it, all of it. But what surprised me most wasn't the anger. It was the grief. Not for losing Cassian, but for losing who I had been with him. The woman who compromised, who minimized herself to make him shine, who thought love meant endurance and loyalty meant silence. I wasn't that woman anymore. I started going for long walks again. No makeup, no entourage, just me and the city. And it was during one of those quiet morning strolls that I ran into Deja. She looked at me, hesitant at first, then opened her arms. I didn't hesitate. "I was scared," she admitted as we sat down on a bench. "I didn't know if you'd hate me for not telling you sooner." "You didn't owe me anything," I said, "but thank you for standing by me when it mattered." She smiled. "Cassian called me the day after the finale, begged me to speak to you. I blocked him." "Good." We sat in silence for a moment. Then she reached into her bag and handed me a worn journal. "This was yours. You left it at the studio. I think you'll want it." It was my old production journal. Notes, sketches, quotes, fragments of storylines I had wanted to pitch, but never had the confidence to. I flipped through the pages, stunned by how much of myself I had buried in those margins. "You should make something from this," Deja said. "Your story, your voice." Maybe I would. That evening, I stood on my rooftop terrace watching the sunset. The city shimmered below, indifferent and infinite. I thought about all the finales I had crafted for other people, the perfect edits, the swelling music, the carefully staged drama. This one wasn't perfect. It was messy, raw, real, but it was mine. I picked up my phone, opened a blank note, and typed 5 words. This is how it ends. But then I deleted them, because it didn't end here. It began. Weeks turned into months, and slowly the noise died down. The internet found new scandals. The tabloids moved on. Cassian faded from the spotlight, his projects canceled, his endorsements pulled. He released a pitiful statement, something about stress and blurred lines, trying to salvage what was left of his reputation. But no one cared. The world had already decided. And me? I was still here, still building. With full creative control at the company, I began development on a new show. Not another romance competition, not another glossy distraction. This one would be different, raw, unfiltered, about women like me, smart, capable, but silenced. It would be called Unscripted. And this time, I wouldn't hide behind the curtain. I would be in front of the camera telling the truth in my own voice. At the first pitch meeting, I stood before a room full of executives, many of whom had once doubted me. "I'm not here to sell you a show," I told them. "I'm here to reclaim the narrative, starting with mine." They greenlit the pilot on the spot. It was strange, finally stepping into the light after so many years of operating in the shadows. But it felt right. Every setback, every betrayal, every silent scream had led me here, and I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was leading. One night, as I wrapped up a late edit session, I got a text from Deja. "Turn on Channel 5. I did, and there he was, Cassian. Paparazzi footage of him stumbling out of a bar, shouting at someone off camera, disheveled, unhinged, a far cry from the man who once curated every angle of his life. I stared at the screen, and for the first time I felt nothing. Not pity, not satisfaction, just indifference. That was how I knew I'd healed. The next morning, I wrote the final monologue for Unscripted. It would open the pilot episode. My voice, my story. They say revenge is sweet, but that's a lie. Revenge is bitter, messy, and sometimes necessary. But healing is power, and power is knowing you don't need to burn everything down to rise. Sometimes you just need to walk away and let the truth do the work. And that's exactly what I did. I let go, not of the lesson, not of the strength, but of the weight, of him, of who I used to be. Because I had hijacked more than just a finale. I had hijacked my life back. And this time, the spotlight was exactly where it belonged. On me.